They repeatedly threw rocks and retreated. Little by little, they were leading the zombies farther away from the skeletons. The females had moved to dig into the skeleton's flank. Their movements are kinda strange. Seriously, the zombies were moving less like they were following orders and more like they were completely distracted. Was there a commander who would approve of their troops moving like that? No, that was unlikely. But that was how they were moving. So was it part of the enemy's plan? Everyone racked their brains. I just don't get it. Yup, I agree, Shastaryu. No matter how hard they thought, they couldn't come up with any meaning the zombies' actions could possibly have. After watching everyone for a while, Zayusu told them what he thought. Could it be their no commander? No commander? Oh, you mean like they were just given initial orders and are following those only? Yeah, like that. Lower tier undead, like zombies and skeletons, for all intents and purposes, had no intelligence of their own. It was most effective to give them orders in real time. It seemed in this instance the zombies had only been given the order to kill nearby lizardmen, so they think they can win as long as they outnumber us. Or could this fight just be a test to see how long they can last with no commander, said Zenbal. Maybe. Are you kidding me? Those bastards. The one who had yelled wasn't Zenbal but Shasaryu. Even he couldn't take this sitting down. They were all risking their lives. Do you mind calming down, Shasaryu? It's not like that for sure what's going on, said the small Fang chief. Yes, sorry, I am glad things are going well. Right, brother. For now we just have to cut down their numbers as much as we can. Combat fatigue wasn't something to sniff at. In a melee fight, the mental wear and tear was unimaginable. On a battlefield, where they could be attacked from any direction, just swinging their weapons a few times would cause double the exhaustion. But the undead didn't feel that. They would just keep attacking without rest. The more time passed, the more obvious the gap between the living and the dead would become. In other words, time was the lizardmen's enemy. Chai should be out there. Contain yourself, Zenbal. Certainly, if they brought out Zenbal's powerful arm, the skeletons would be gone in no time, but that would mean showing their hand. Zayusu and the other 5 had to remain as trump cards. Of course, they would go if they were truly out of options, but otherwise they needed to keep their potential to themselves until a really strong enemy appeared. But it's quite convenient for us that they aren't coming this way, said Zayusu, garnering agreement. Then he asked Crush, are things going okay on your end? Yes, the ritual is going fine, she answered, looking into the village. The priests were currently conducting a ritual that had the potential to give the lizardmen another trump card. Normally it would take an extremely long time, but with all the priests from each tribe cooperating, they would finish in time to use it during the battle. It's amazing what we can accomplish when we work together. Yeah. After the war, we shared just a little information. But this time, after the fight is over, there are so many more things I want to do. The other chiefs nodded emphatically at Shasryu's remark. This was the first time they were exchanging and pooling knowledge. They could clearly see how much it would help all the tribes to grow. The realization hit the 3 chiefs hardest. They had allied before, yet never exchanged knowledge. Zayusu looked at the 5 chiefs and laughed. What's so funny? Asked Crush. Now I mean, I know it's a bad time, but I am just happy. Crush instantly understood how he felt. I get it, Zayusu. Zayusu crinkled his eyes as if Crush's smile were the sun itself. Both their gazes were full of longing and affection. Their bodies were separated, of course. At this very moment, there were lizardmen going to their deaths. They couldn't answer the feelings in their hearts while that was going on. But their tails were moving with minds of their own, poking and drawing back. MPH, what do you make of it, big bro? They ray in their own world. Steamy. My conclusion, it's great to be young. You have a future. The 4 older lizardmen nodded as they watched the cute couple. Of course, Zayusu and Crush could hear them talking. As their tails whipped around, they got their expressions under control. Brother, they ray on the move. The change of topic was fast. Shasryu and the others grinned awkwardly as they turned their attention to the enemy army. The skeleton riders had set out in a big curve. Whoa, whoa, are they coming this way? With the riders, are they trying to unsettle us by attacking this position? No, aren't they trying to get around the rear of the warriors and males to surround and wipe them out? This is bad. Without saying it, everyone reached the same conclusion. The skeleton riders were a problem. If they had moved right away, the lizardmen could have crushed them. But now the warriors and males were in a melee battle. The hunters were drawing the zombies away, and the females had begun hurling rocks at the skeleton's flank. The Lizardmen didn't have the force to suppress the skeleton riders now. Maybe it's time for us to move. Shasryu nodded at the small Fang Chief's idea. The question is who should go? Yes, it's time to make our first move. Skeleton riders were skeletons equipped with lances. They were mounted on similarly bony horses. They didn't have any special powers aside from how easy they were to deploy, but their mobility in the marsh was outstanding. Their bony bodies didn't sink very far into the mud. This allowed them to move at a horse's pace. 100 units took a long detour to arrive behind the Lizardmen for a rear assault. They detected 3 Lizardmen coming toward them up ahead on the left, but they ignored them. The newcomers to the battle weren't included in their orders, so until they were attacked, they wouldn't have anything to do with them. That was just how undead, with no intelligence, operated. They had nearly reached the back of the Lizardman army when the rider out in front found his vision spinning wildly. The skeleton had been thrown high into the air, falling swiftly into the marsh. A human would have been confused and unable to act right away, but the unintelligent, undead skeleton rider promptly moved to carry out its orders. It stood up immediately, but it did stumble from the heavy damage. Another rider went tumbling into the first, and the 2 units' bones broke apart and scattered into the marsh. This was happening here and there on the marsh, but why? The answer was extremely simple: traps. The Lizardmen had buried wooden boxes in the water. When the horses stepped into them, their momentum caused them to trip. Skeleton riders went tumbling one after another. Humans would have slowed down or taken some kind of countermeasure, but these riders did not. They might have had the judgment to detour around a gaping hole, but not to guard against hidden traps. This thinking was outside the scope of their orders, and they didn't have the intelligence to adapt to their situation. Maintaining their speed and charging straight into the traps was like mass suicide. Still, although the traps were effective, all they did was slow them down. They dealt some damage, but it wasn't enough to destroy them. The riders simply picked their muddied selves up. Then a sharp whistling sound rang out. One of the fallen skeleton riders' heads exploded. Detecting a hostile party, the riders scanned the area. Another head shattered like glass. The riders discovered the 3 Lizardmen at a distance of a little over 85 yards. Rocks launched with pinpoint accuracy from their slings were knocking off their heads. The skeleton riders advanced. At the same time, the battle with the skeletons on the ground was reaching a turning point. After the twang of many bows came the sound of arrows raining down. The 150 skeleton archers fired bolts over Lizardmen and skeletons alike. It wasn't over with one volley. There was a second, a third. This attack took the Lizardmen by surprise. Several Lizardmen were hit and crumpled to the ground. They couldn't protect themselves against the cascade while in combat with the skeletons. Of course, the arrows also hit the skeletons, but they didn't take damage. While the piercing damage-resistant skeletons pushed forward, the skeleton archers loosed their arrows from behind. It was a brilliant maneuver. Considering the time it would take to completely obliterate a 200-strong vanguard in order to reach the archers, this should have doomed the Lizardmen. The problem was that it came too late. If they had carried out this plan at the beginning of the battle, it would have proven fatal for the Lizardmen. They would have been overwhelmed by the numerical disparity, and the battle would have ended differently. But now, the outcome was already decided. The Lizardmen ignored the skeletons, having already whittled their numbers. They charged directly at the archers. 150 arrows rained down, and several Lizardmen collapsed into the mud, but not all of them. Lizardmen had thick skin and tough scales. Even without armor, they had the same defenses as a human in leather armor. If an arrow pierced their skin, their thick muscles would save their life. Fewer Lizardmen fell because the skeleton archers didn't have a great deal of strength for drawing their bows. The force behind their attacks wasn't enough to kill a Lizardman. With battle cries, the Lizardmen fearlessly pushed through. When the deadly barrage came a second time, they protected their heads with their arms. They ran for their lives as the hail of missiles pierced skin and tore through bodies. A third volley was about all the skeleton archers could do. If they had any intelligence, they probably would have retreated. If they had fallen back temporarily and fought cohesively with the rest of the remaining undead army, there might have been a way for them to retain their usefulness in the fray. However, They lacked the brains that allowed for such a complicated directive, and those orders had never been given. They followed the simple orders they had. They continued shooting arrows at the Lizardmen even when they were practically on top of one another. A war cry went up. A wave of Lizardmen swallowed the skeleton archers just like it had the skeletons. The long-range fighters didn't have any room to use their bows. They fell into the soggy earth under the Lizardmen attacks. There were still zombies remaining, but almost all the skeletons had been defeated. This was when a new enemy was finally unleashed, the undead beasts. These undead were made from the corpses of a variety of animals like wolves, snakes, and boars. They were monsters that combined zombie endurance with animal dexterity. The undead beasts headed straight for the Lizardmen. Some were fast, some were slow. It was a disjointed charge with no sense of rank or formation. Attacks that came from below were surprisingly hard to dodge. The beasts employed the animal-like method of biting at their enemies' ankles to slow and drag them down before dealing the final blow. For the Lizardmen, who were already tired, this was a problem indeed. A number of those who were slow to react had their throats ripped out. When a comrade fell at a warrior's side, it didn't matter if they braced themselves mentally or if they believed the ancestral spirits were with them, their morale was shaken. The head warriors fought at the front of the line, but the pressure was gradually increasing. It was only a matter of time before the Lizardmen lines broke, and they routed. At that moment, the marsh rippled with excitement. 2 cones of mud, a little over 5 feet high, appeared. They had no arms, legs, or heads and began to move. Though they had no feet, they moved nimbly across the marsh, gliding and advancing on the undead beasts. Once they gotten closer, they reached out with whip-like appendages. These appendages were longer than the mud creatures were tall, and extended from about where the arms would have been on a person. These were one of the Lizardmen's trump cards. The priest had combined their powers to summon them swamp elementals. The swamp elementals plowed into the pack of undead beasts, struck with their whip-like tentacles, and yanked some of them off the ground. Of course, the undead beasts countered, scratching with their claws and biting with their fangs. Both sides were fearless in the fray, but gradually it became clear the swamp elementals had the advantage. It was simply a matter of an imbalance in individual potential. The power of their priests was winning against the undead. Seeing this restored the courage of the Lizardmen warriors, and they took up the charge once more. Thus began a gruesome brawl. In this battle, unlike the one with the skeletons up till now, numerous Lizardmen lost their lives, but the Lizardmen held the numerical advantage now, and the balance of battle began to tip in their favor. We were going to lose. Cocytus understood that. None of the undead in the troops he was given had intelligence. That was why they lost, and he'd been afraid of that since the beginning, but he hadn't expected them to be so weak. He was bothered by how shallow his thinking had been. There was a way to turn this around, but it wasn't a good one. Using that method was practically a synonym for defeat, but could he really report to his master that they had lost? Cocytus grabbed a message scroll. The one to call in this situation was, "Is this Demiurge?" "Yes, my friend. What in the world happened that you would send me a message?" Demiurge's deep, calm voice echoed in Cocytus's head. As one of Nazarik's top minds, Demiurge would surely have a good idea. It was frustrating to go for help to someone who, in a way, was a rival, but he had to avoid defeat at all costs. The army of the Great Tomb of Nazarik, lose. To avoid that fate, he would bow his head as low as it took. Actually, Demiurge listened silently to Cocytus's explanation about his present situation. It used up a whole scroll. He heaved an annoyed sigh. "And what do you want me to do about that?" "I want you to lend me your wisdom. At this rate, we'll be defeated. If it were just me losing, I would accept it, but I can't disgrace the Great Tomb of Nazaik and the Supreme Ons. Does Lord Aints even want you to win? Huh? What is that supposed to mean? Why did he build an army of such low-tier minions?" Cocytus had been wondering the same thing. He didn't see any reason to build an army from the weakest minions the Great Tomb of Nazarik had to offer. He must have had some idea, but what in the world was he trying to do? "I have a few guesses." Cocytus didn't say it aloud, but he definitely had quite a bit of respect for the demon. "So Cocytus, you've been there for some days. Before attacking, you should have gathered some intelligence on the Lizardmen, right?" That should have been a given. However, but Lord Ainz ordered me to take them out with the army he provided in a head-on fight. Yeah, but I want you to think for a minute, Cocytus. Isn't the most important thing the results ULL offer to Lord Ainz? If your main objective was to obliterate the village, shouldn't you have searched for the best way to do that? Cocytus had no words to reply with. Demiurge's comments were right on the money. He must have had that in mind when giving you those minions. He gave me a force that couldn't win on purpose. There is certainly a very good chance. If you had collected intelligence, you might have realized that you didn't have sufficient force to take out the village. Then you would have been able to report back and say, Lord Ainz, annihilating them will be difficult with these troops. I need stronger troops. Perhaps that was his aim. In other words, he should have verified his master's true intent, not just followed orders, but adjusted the operation at his discretion and then acted. That's what Demiurge was saying. It was probably to make you more conscious of these things. I am sure he had other aims as well, but other aims? Cocytus asked, flustered. He already made one error. He didn't want to make any more. He sent a messenger to the villages, but he never mentioned Nazarik's name. And he told you not to show yourself. That means Cocytus swallowed hard, hanging on Demiurge's every word. But the next ones didn't come. NGH, sorry Cocytus, something urgent has come up. Sorry, but that's all. I am hoping for your victory. Demiurge cut the conversation short, and the message spell disappeared. With some idea of what would make level-headed Demiurge panic, Cocytus shifted his gaze to the other person in the room. Entoma was carelessly removing a beat-up talisman from her forehead. For a talisman wielder to use one now meant everything was too late. It was time to unleash the monster he'd been told to save as a last resort. But was that really what his master wanted him to do? Cocytus, for perhaps the first time, thought carefully about what intentions might have been hidden in the orders he was given. But in the end, there was only one conclusion to draw. Cocytus cast message. An order for you, Elder Lich Commander, move out. Show the Lizardmen your power. His body of skin and bones was wrapped in a splendid but old robe, and in one hand, he clutched a gnarled staff. His rotting face, with just a bit of skin stretched over the bones, spoke of dark wisdom. Negative energy rose from his body and hung around him like a mist. This undead caster was an Elder Lich. He received the order from Cocytus and glanced at the marsh. Then he gave an order to the flabby, red-skinned undead immediately behind him, blood-meat hulks created in the same way he had. Slay those 3 lizardmen. Following the order, 2 hulks began walking toward the 3 lizardmen who had wiped out the riders. They were low-tier undead who could use their muscular strength to punch. They also had regeneration abilities, so it would take a while for an opponent in the same level range to beat them with simple physical attacks. The Elder Lich decided they would buy him enough time. Certainly, this was a poor plan. As a caster, the Elder Lich wasn't terribly strong in a close-quarters fight. Having the blood-meat hulks attend to him would have been the smart strategy, but he couldn't do that. The order he was given was to show his power. That meant he needed to use his overwhelming might to devastate the Lizardman base on his own. As he walked, the Elder Lich crumpled his horrifying face in a chuckle. It was so simple. As an Elder Lich created by the supreme being Ainz Ul Gaun, he was far stronger than Nazarik's auto-spawning Elder Liches. All he had to do was display that power. He swore on the name given him by his master that he would be victorious. Iaguvua will bring victory to the Supreme One. The Lizardmen, shoulders slumping in fatigue, heaved a sigh of relief after finishing off the undead beasts. Despite hearts pained with sorrow, they wore faint smiles. It was true that more than a few of them had been injured or killed, but they were lucky, that was all. If the swamp elementals hadn't joined the battle, no, if they had even showed up a little bit later, their line would have broken, and everything probably would have fallen apart. Let us go. It was the voice of one of the head warriors announcing the next round. Everyone's bodies were heavy with exhaustion. They could barely hold their weapons, and swinging them was a chore, but the fight wasn't over yet. The zombies were a ways away, but the warriors still had to mop them up, and they had to stay on the lookout after that. Okay, carry the heavily injured to the village. Everyone else, follow his command, was interrupted by a blaze of hellfire. The heat wave pummeled the area, and at the center of the flames, the 2 elementals reeled. The flames vanished as if they had never existed, and the elementals were in shambles. With just one attack, they were half destroyed. A second round of flames leaped up before the Lizardmen had time to cry out in shock. Unable to withstand it, the bodies of the elementals collapsed and melted away inside the fire. The Lizardmen were unable to wrap their heads around the sudden annihilation of elementals that had been so effective against the undead beasts. What happened? Despite acknowledging that the swamp elementals had been wiped out, they desperately refused to understand it.